Authorities in China take harsh measures, working to control the country's emerging virus outbreaks. Residents reportedly sealed inside their homes. That's if they don't comply with harsh pandemic restrictions. The gate of a neighborhood is welded shut soon after a confirmed virus case was discovered there. Residents living in some city high-rises heard cries for help. Besides lockdown orders, the Swiss government calls out Beijing. That's after Chinese media quoted a Swiss scientist who blamed the U.S. for the pandemic. But a background check revealed the person doesn't seem to exist. And a Chinese court sentences a Canadian citizen to 11 years in prison. But Canada's Prime Minister calls it unacceptable. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. A new wave of the CCP virus is hitting a dozen Chinese provinces. At the same time, more videos are circulating online showing the authorities' extreme control measures, such as sealing residents inside their homes if they don't comply. A video shows a man just a few steps from his home during exercises in the yard with no one else around. But pandemic control officers found him and sent him back inside. They followed him to his door and then sealed it shut.
进去，警告一次。
好了，马上就回去，2分钟。
警告第二次。
2分钟。
注意哪动？不要后悔哈。
我干嘛啦？
你干嘛了？口罩戴了吗？
就在门口晒
没有口罩不？
我知道。
我看到写了。
我知道，我跟你说一下。
不要口罩。
你看到吧？
回家。放。
A minute later, the man tried to open his door and argue, but he was forced back inside. Another video shows a group chat. Someone in quarantine at home complained that their door would be sealed without warning if the pandemic control staff found that the residents opened the doors up to 3 times a day. They can't even dump their garbage. The person says the garbage sits inside and stinks. Reports of similarly harsh virus prevention measures are also coming in from the city of Wuhan. An entrance to one neighborhood was welded shut in an attempt to halt virus spread.
把门焊死，
焊死出不去了。
The entrance was sealed on Sunday after one person there had reportedly tested positive for the CCP virus, or the Chinese Communist Party virus known as COVID-19. The Epoch Times reached out to the local police station in charge of the area. The station informed the newspaper that 2 small gates in the neighborhood are still passable, and added that officers didn't know how long the area would stay closed. Many are taking issue with the city's strict measures. One netizen commented online, writing, "What if a resident there is ill and needs an ambulance?" Another one questioned the Chinese regime's methods, noting they would rather kill a group of people in order to control the epidemic. The people are currently starving, dying of illness and flooding, but some people simply can't see it. Wuhan was the original epicenter of the pandemic in China when the virus first broke out last year. This year, the communist regime is embracing the same harsh measures used last year, including locking people in their homes and pausing standard movement and activities. According to official reports, China saw over 100 new virus cases on Tuesday. Around half of them occurred in Jiangsu province. As outbreaks continue to spring up, authorities' draconian prevention tactics have also found their way into the province. In one district in Yangzhou City, authorities sealed entrances to entire residential high-rises. The move aims to block virus spread, but also traps residents inside. Videos posted online show residents crying for help inside a building. Locked in, they're unable to leave to buy food, and food deliverers also can't get inside. A similar situation was spotted in central China's Zhengzhou city. There, people were heard yelling, "Save us!" The harsh measure is reminiscent of the lockdowns in Wuhan city last year. At the time, residents trapped inside their homes can also be heard shouting from their windows. A southern Chinese city is becoming a hotspot for the virus. China has designated over 200 districts as having medium to high risk of virus infection. The districts are spread across 12 provinces, with over 40% inside Yangzhou. And the city is tightening its virus control measures, temporarily closing off 7 local districts. These districts are roped off, and staff members patrol 24/7 to ensure no one leaves without permission. Starting Wednesday, the city is also having its 6th round of mass virus testing. Chinese state-owned media was apparently caught quoting someone who doesn't actually exist. The person in question is a Swiss scientist that seems to be made up. Chinese media cited his criticism of the U.S. NTD's Don Ma has more.
China may have just been caught red-handed engaging in a fake news campaign. Chinese state-owned media outlets reportedly invented a non-existent person, then quoted him. It appeared to be part of an effort to further their own narrative about the pandemic's origins. The person is a supposed Swiss biologist and goes by the name Wilson Edwards. He was quoted by Chinese state-run media as saying that the U.S. is politicizing pandemic origin investigations. But China may not have expected Switzerland to do a background check on Edwards. On Tuesday, the Swiss embassy in Beijing tweeted that there is no registry of any Swiss citizen with the name Wilson Edwards. It states that the Chinese media's publications citing Edwards are fake news. The Chinese outlets quoted a post on Edwards' Facebook account saying he witnessed U.S. efforts to politicize the World Health Organization's virus investigations. Edwards cited unnamed WHO sources and fellow researchers as saying that they felt enormous pressure and even intimidation from the U.S. The U.S. is so obsessed with attacking China. Edwards' Facebook account has since been deleted. The Swiss embassy revealed that the account was only created last month on July 24th. It only posted once and had just 3 friends. Many Chinese state-run media outlets have also removed their articles involving Edwards. That's including Global Times and the People's Daily. The apparent fake news campaign comes soon after the WHO proposed a second virus origins probe in China. If accepted, it would involve investigations into the lab leak theory. But China rejected the proposal. Vice Minister of China's National Health Commission says Beijing cannot accept this kind of plan. The U.S. voiced support for the proposal. In May, President Biden also ordered a renewed investigation into the origins of the pandemic. Don Ma, NTD News.
Beijing's top broadcaster is once again taking aim at the U.S. Chinese Communist Party mouthpiece, CCTV, is labeling Washington with a highly dishonorable title. Each one describes an area where the U.S. is a global leader, according to the outlet. Among them are titles like a global leader in failing domestic pandemic prevention, a leader in letting the pandemic spread, a leader in shifting political blame, a leader in spreading misinformation, and a global leader in promoting terrorism by probing the origins of the virus. The image has since been reposted across social media. One netizen pointed out an apparent contradiction to the titles. If the U.S. is so bad, why do party officials keep moving to the U.S. and they desperately don't want to decouple? Another netizen also asked why Chinese officials recently told the U.S. to remove visa restrictions on party officials in that case, and why a number of Chinese companies are trying to list in the U.S. One user wrote that the labels actually seem to describe Beijing. Canadian citizen Michael Spavor was sentenced to 11 years in prison in China. His country's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says the punishment is unacceptable. That's as the U.S. and Australia are chiming in to support their ally.
A Chinese court convicted Canadian businessman Michael Spavor of espionage on Wednesday and sentenced him to 11 years in prison. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau called the sentencing absolutely unacceptable and unjust, adding that the trial did not satisfy even the minimum standards required by international law. In a video addressed to diplomats and journalists in Beijing, Canada's ambassador to China, Dominic Barton, called for Spavor's immediate release.
We condemn in the strongest possible terms this decision rendered after a legal process that lacked both fairness and transparency. Our thoughts are with Michael and his family during this difficult time.
Those comments were backed up by the US Embassy in Beijing, which accused China of attempting to use human beings as bargaining leverage. The case is widely seen in Ottawa and Washington as linked to that of Huawei's chief financial officer, Meng Wanzhou. Spavor's sentencing came as lawyers in Canada representing the Chinese executive, make a final push to convince a court there not to extradite her. Meng faces charges of misleading HSBC about Huawei's business dealings with Iran. Trudeau is also calling for the release of another Canadian, Michael Kovrig, who was awaiting a verdict in an espionage case. Like Spavor, he was detained just days after Meng was arrested at Vancouver International Airport on a warrant from the United States. Some observers have said convictions of the two Canadians could ultimately facilitate an agreement in which they are released and sent back to Canada. Spavor's family released a statement on Wednesday saying, quote, "While we disagree with the charges, we realise that this is the next step in the process to bring Michael home, and we will continue to support him through this challenging time."
An official for Canada's Attorney General told the court in charge of the Huawei executive's case that there was no cause to stop the case. He added no person has enjoyed a fairer hearing than Meng. And Australia is showing its support for Canada in a tweet, saying Australia stands with Canada in response to the arbitrary detention of Michael Spavor and the upholding of the death penalty for Robert Schellenberg in China. They are calling for due process and transparency and said they oppose the death penalty in all circumstances. Hong Kong's pro-democracy Professional Teachers Union announced it has disbanded on Tuesday. This as the political environment of the former British colony has changed in favor of the Chinese Communist regime.
But the major reason is that, the drastic changes in the social and political environment, which posed huge pressure on us, and it is quite a huge crisis, and we cannot cope with.
The announcement came after Hong Kong's government severed ties with the union last week and accused it of spreading anti-Beijing sentiments.
They have allowed politics to prevail over education and made these political issues or caused these anti-government and anti-China sentiment entering schools.
Chinese state media had previously called the union a malignant tumor that should be eradicated. The union is Hong Kong's largest single-industry trade union with nearly 100,000 members. Beijing imposed a national security law on Hong Kong last year, aiming to crack down on dissent following months of pro-democracy protests in the city. Over 100 pro-democracy figures have since been arrested under that law. Critics have slammed the new rules, saying the former British colony is losing the freedoms it was promised when it was handed back to Beijing in 1997.
A foreign tech giant seems to be keeping its distance from Beijing. Japanese tech company Softbank is holding off investing in China as it waits for the regime's clampdown against its tech sector to play out. This, according to Softbank's chief executive. Earlier in May, Softbank posted record annual profit. Part of that came from its investment arm Vision Fund's exposure in Chinese tech firms, like ride-hailing firm Didi and Uber for truck startup Full Truck Alliance. Those companies listed in New York, but the Chinese regime's suppression of its tech sector has hammered valuations of trillions of shares between the companies, underscoring Softbank's China risk. Investment in China makes up about a quarter of its fund's portfolio. The group is also seeking to cut dependence on its largest asset, a stake in Chinese online shopping giant Alibaba. Softbank shares have slipped a third from its two-decade highs in March. Softbank also dumped shares in some U.S. tech giants like Facebook, Microsoft, Alphabet, and Netflix. An expert says Beijing's policy towards the U.S. could see a turning point. That's as the Chinese regime's mouthpiece published 2 articles slamming the U.S. NTD's Juliet Song has the details.
In a rare move, the Chinese Communist Party's media mouthpiece is directing criticism toward the Biden administration. The outlet called Xinhua is the Chinese regime's official press agency. And for 2 days in a row, it's published 2 articles slamming the United States. One article blames the Biden administration for following Trump's sanctions on Hong Kong, calling the penalties wrong acts. In the second article, Xinhua took aim at America's alliance system. It alleges the system has committed 7 sins, including lying, theft, and violence. It accuses the U.S. and its allies of inciting violence and robbing other countries of their resources. A China affairs analyst says the move could signal a turning point in Beijing's foreign policy.
Because articles like these come from Beijing's official mouthpiece, to some extent, it means some of China's U.S. policy could be seeing substantial changes.
He says with the two countries' economies so closely intertwined,
any policy change from China could impact many Americans' lives or their living environments.
One example is Beijing's recent clampdown on its tech companies. In one case, authorities removed rideshare company Didi from app stores after it listed in the U.S. stock market. Beijing's actions have sparked fear in the market and sent share prices plummeting for Chinese giants listed in the U.S. Developer Tencent and internet giant Baidu are among them. So far, American investors have lost hundreds of billions of dollars. Tang says a change in Beijing's foreign policy impacts more than just America.
U.S.-China relations are the key to whether we can have a stable international order. If there are any major changes between U.S.-China relations, or one of the two parties changes its course on its foreign policy, the impact that brings isn't limited to just the two countries.
Xinhua's articles come as U.S. and China relations continue along a downward spiral. Last month, America's #2 diplomat Wendy Sherman met with her Chinese counterpart. Before the talks ended, the Chinese side told her that current U.S.-China relations are now locked in a stalemate and face serious difficulties. What's more, the Chinese Navy is holding drills in the South China Sea right now. They began soon after American soldiers started a joint exercise with Indonesia's army. Xinhua rarely criticized the Biden administration by name. Tang says he thinks Beijing is sending a signal through Xinhua's articles.
That the Chinese Communist Party has given up its hope or illusion in the Biden administration.
Tang says when Biden first took office, Beijing still had hope the administration would adopt a different China approach, one less strict than the previous Trump-era policy.
So that the Chinese regime can resume the cooperation and exchanges with the U.S. like in the old days, and so they can still obtain benefits like capital and technology.
But the Biden administration kept the hard stance on China, a decision Tang says disappoints the communist regime. He also explained the articles serve another purpose, to deny the U.S.-led rule-based international order.
It depicts the rules-based international order as a dark, chaotic order, one that brings world war, poverty, and robbery. It slapped many labels and accusations on the current international order.
He says those labels reject the international order's legitimacy.
What the Chinese Communist Party actually wants to say is that they want to establish a new global order. They often said in the past that they want to smash the old world and establish a new one. So who's going to set up this new world? Of course, it's going to be the Chinese regime itself, a so-called new international order under Beijing's charge.
The old world refers to the current international order, governed by democracy and freedom, while the new world represents one run by communism. The Xinhua article also accuses the U.S. of bullying its allies economically. Tang says the goal there is to pit the U.S. against its allies. Juliet Song, NTD News.
China currently dominates the rare earth industry, but there's a new bill in the House seeking to boost U.S. domestic production. The bill plans to extend tax credits to American companies that produce rare earth magnets. But will it help? NTD's Patrick Hayden explains.
House lawmakers introduced a bipartisan bill Tuesday to extend tax credits to companies that domestically produce rare earth magnets.
Yeah, I think this is a very important step to start bringing back magnet manufacturing to the US. As has been well reported right now, we're almost entirely dependent on China for permanent magnets with no domestic production, leaving any potential nefarious actions by China or weaponization.
Althouse says the bill would start incentivizing companies to make these magnets in the US. He says currently the US industry is way off being able to provide for President Biden's goal of 50% electric vehicle sales by 2030. He says China is currently 10 to 20 years ahead of the US in mining to make rare earth magnets.
This is a very dangerous situation. We can't manufacture an F-35. We can't manufacture most defense equipment that contains permanent magnets in them without the reliance on China. So we have a national security issue, we have an economic issue, and of course, a green economy issue, and we're at the 11th hour, I would say beyond that at this stage.
Another expert says the credits are welcome, but they won't do much.
These tax credits are going to be a very, very minimal impact towards helping the U.S. industry move forward with metals and mining.
Vong says domestic regulations make it difficult for companies in the US to assess if a particular site is viable for mining.
There's so much legal hurdles and so many policies, both at the federal, state, and local levels, that are really prohibiting these companies to be able to truly mine and process these minerals, and that's where the problem really lies. Within our borders.
Vong says the red tape is why companies go overseas.
The Chinese government has really fully supported and backed the metals and mining industries so they can get the minerals, and they have given the complete green light, the complete support, both financially, legally, and regulatory-wise, to dominate the market because they understand the future of the economy.
Vong says the rare earth material mining industry needs support, like the pharmaceutical and technology industries have gotten from the government. Patrick Hayden, NTD News.
And that's all for today's China in Focus. Thanks for watching and see you next time.